Okay, so since we didn't meet last week, it has been a long time, right, that we met last. So let's do a quick review of where we are, okay? So before last week, we talked about semantics, right? So semantics, right? Semantics has to do with meanings, you guys remember? Semantics has to do with meanings. Right? And we said that there are many factors that come into play when we talk about meanings, right? And linguistically speaking, we have deixis or deictic expression, right? Expressions that depend on the context to point out the referent, remember? Expression that depend on the context to pick out the reference, right? The appropriate referent. For example, pronouns, right? You or we or I. Who would be the reference of those pronouns, for example, right? That's what we talked about last time, the time before last time, right? And we also talked about entailment. You guys remember? Entailment is a strong relationship between two statements, right? Two or more statements, right? And an entailment is a logical relationship, right, between two statements. We just look at what one sentence entails another sentence, right? And we also look at presupposition. Right? Presupposition is a different kind of meaning, right? Presupposition is what the speaker or the writer assumes to be the case, right? So for example, if I say, where's my television? If I say, where's my television? Let's see. Where is my television? The word my tells you that I presuppose, right? Or I assume, right? I assume that I have a television. The speaker assumes that he has a television. If he says, where's my television? That's what we call a presupposition. Remember when we talked about presupposition, there's existential presupposition, remember? Existential, meaning that something exists or not, right? Existential. When you have specific reference, such as my or a proper name like Krista, right? A presupposition is that that thing exists, right? That's why we call it existential. And there are other things that trigger a presupposition, words like again. When you say again, let's do it again. The word again means that something already happened, right? Happened before, already happened before, like that. Let's read again. It means that we read it already once at least. At least once. And so last time we also talked about speech acts. Remember speech acts? So I'll change the board here. So speech act, right? Speech act. We said that typically the form matches the function, right? Form matches the function. For example, when you have a question, the function is usually to ask for information. That's just one example, right? If you have a command, which is a form, or some people call it an imperative, the function is to issue a command or to tell, to advise, to tell, to order, whatever, right? Typically, the form matches the function, right? When the form matches the function, we say that we have a direct speech act. A direct speech act is when the form matches the function. When you use a question form to ask for information, when you use an imperative to give advice to people or to tell people to do something, right? But there are cases where we have what we call indirect. Remember, indirect speech act. Indirect speech act. That's when we have the form that does not match the function, right? We can use questions to make an implied statement, right? So for example, if I say, who cares? Right? Who cares? Right? Let's say if your friend tells you you have to study hard or else you fail the exam. Okay? You have to study hard or else you will fail the exam. And you say, who cares? You say, who cares? Is this a question? It is a question in form, right? But the function is not to ask for information of who exactly cares, right? But the function is to make a sarcastic statement or to say that I don't care, right? So in this kind of case where the form doesn't matches the function, or when the form is used just to say a different thing than the form, right? To say a different intended message, then we said that we have an indirect statement. Indirect speech act, I'm sorry, like that, okay? So that's what we have looked at when we talked about semantics, okay? And now, before we move on to the last chapter, which is historical linguistics, we have one thing that we haven't talked about, and this is, let's see, this is in the previous PowerPoint that we didn't finish, okay? Like it's called in here, right? The form is a statement, right? But the intended meaning might be that you ask someone to implicitly and politely, you ask someone to close the window or turn on the heater for you, depending on the context. So it's an indirect speech act. And for an indirect speech act, the locutionary meaning, which is the literal meaning, is different from the illocutionary meaning, right? The intended meaning. So that's what we talked about. Now, the last thing that we will finish in perhaps 20 minutes is what we call conversational rules, okay? So this is a different type of meaning, than entailment. So we have talked about the importance of context, right? Speaker intention, that's where you have the locutionary and illocutionary, right? Now, when we go about interacting with people in real life, we share, it is said that we share implicit conversational rules with people. Implicit here meaning that these rules are not written down, but we all share that, right, as cultural subjects in that particular society, right? And we are well aware of how to follow these implicit rules or how to ignore them in certain cases, right? In order to convey a particular implied message. So let's look at those rules, okay? These rules, there are 4 rules. These rules are not written down and nobody tells you. It's not like after you are born or as a kid, your mother told you how to follow these rules. Not like that. But these are implicit, right? Because we learn how to use language implicitly, right, by interacting with people. So these rules are called maxims of conversation. Okay, maxims are rules, and they are proposed by Grice. Right, Grice was a logician, and he proposed the following maxims of conversations. Right, he said that typically when we talk to people, we cooperate with them. Right, we cooperate. We try to make our conversation as informative as possible and as clear as possible, and we tell people the truth, right? That's how conversation proceeds, right? That's how we interact with people. We tell the truth. If they ask us about something, we tell them the truth, right? That's the typical case, and we give them the amount of information that they want, and we say things clearly, right, in order to help them understand what we want to convey, and we say relevant things, for example, right? So those are what we call conversational rules or conversational maxims. Typically, we follow those maxims. And there are 4 maxims in detail. The first is maxim of quantity. So quantity has to do with amount of information, right? The maxim of quantity says that do not give more information than necessary during a conversation. That's what we typically do, right? So what the other person wants from us, we give them just what they want, not more than what they want or not less than what they want, right? The next maxim is maxim of quality. Do not give wrong information or information that you have no evidence for, meaning that when people for example, ask us a question, we give them the truth information, right? True information only. We tell them the truth, right? We don't normally lie, right? We don't normally lie, but we give them the truth, right? As far as we know, right? As much as we know. And then the next maxim is maxim of relevance. Say only relevant things, right? We don't go off the topic. We just stay on the topic, right? Normally. Typically speaking. And then finally, we have maxim of manner. Say things clearly. Manner has to do with the way we say it. Say it clearly, briefly, and orderly, right? Orderly meaning we help them organize the information in a way that is easy for the listener to understand. So we typically follow these rules, right? These maxims. So we, another name for it is the cooperative principle, okay? So let me write it out here. It's called the cooperative principle. Right? So these 4 rules allow us to be cooperative, right? To cooperate with people who we talk to, right? Or who we write to, like that. That's typical. We cooperate with people. Okay? However, there are some cases that we can manipulate those rules or those maxims. Manipulate is to control, right? To control. In some circumstances, we want to violate the maxims. We want to violate the rules. Okay? We intentionally violate the maxims, right? For example, sometimes we intentionally lie to people, right? Sometimes we give people more information than they want. Sometimes we intentionally make things unclear to people. Sometimes we say irrelevant things intentionally, right? So we say that we violate those maxims. We violate them in order to mislead them, right? In order to mislead them so that they believe something else, right? So violation is what we call the quiet non-observance of a maxim, meaning that you do not observe the maxim. You don't follow the maxim quietly. Quietly here meaning that the listener has no way to know that you are violating the maxim, right? And you don't want them to know either, right? So, for example, when the maxim of quantity is violated quietly, quietly here meaning secretly, the speaker doesn't provide sufficient information in order to mislead or in order to deceive the listener. So if your mom asks you, did you study a lot today? You say, I have been studying till now, right? So your mom will assume that, oh, you study a lot, right? Till now, meaning it's continuing. But in fact, you just started studying 30 minutes ago, for example, right? But is it a lie? No, it's not a lie because it's still true, right? You have been studying till now, starting from 30 minutes ago, like that. It's not a lie, but you don't provide, intentionally not provide sufficient information for her to be misled, right? For her to believe that you have studied a lot, like that. So this is what we call violating the maxim quietly, because mom will not know that you have the intention to mislead her, not to lie, okay, not to lie. And then, or quality, maximum quality. Quality says that you have to give just enough information, right? Not more or not less. So the speaker says the opposite to deceive. For example, do you love me? Yes, I do. When is in fact the opposite, right? That you don't love her. So you intentionally lie, and then the listener will not know, because this is the quietly violation, right? Quietly violating the maxim, like that. And you can violate the manner maxim by being unclear. You can violate the relation maxim by changing the topic, by putting things that are irrelevant in order to distract the listener's attention, like that, in order to deceive people, in order to mislead people, like that. Okay? So that's the case of violating quietly. We will not be looking at this case, right? We will not paying a lot of attention to this case because it's not normal, right? We don't do that. We don't go around trying to mislead people. That's one reason. And another reason is that we cannot know for sure. Because it's not frequent, we don't know for sure whether, when we analyze language, whether that person tries to deceive people or not. So we will not be focusing on this, but we'll be focusing on the other type, which is also a case of manipulating the maxim, but what we call flouting. Flouting is not violating. Flouting is a special type of violating. Flouting the maxim is a blatant show of breaking maxims. Blatant means obvious, clear, right? Clear or obvious. The other type, remember, violating the maxim quietly. You don't want the other person to know, and the other person doesn't know. But here, you do it obviously, right? So that it's obvious to the other person that you want to violate the maxim, one of the maxims. Breaking the rules in order to lead the hearer to look for a covert. Covert is implied. Implied meaning known as implicature. So this is different from the other case, okay? The other case, the other person doesn't know and you don't want them to know. But here, you want that person to know that you are breaking the maxim, one of the maxims, and also you want to convey an implicature. You want to convey an implied meaning. So this is different. And the hearer will try to work out that implicature, assuming that you want to convey some implied message, like that. So this is different. We'll be focusing on this. So I have different examples of how each maxim can be flouted. Maxim of relevance, for example. If you flout the maxim of relevance, or some people call maxim of relation, doesn't matter. Relevance or relation, okay? Same thing. John says, do you have your bike with you? Mary says, I walked in today, right? So here, Mary is breaking the maxim or flouting the maxim blatantly in order to convey an implied message to John. And she's being cooperative. She's trying to tell the truth to John, right? But when you look at the question, do you have the bike with you? The most straightforward way, the most relevant answer would be, yes, I have my bike with me. No, I don't have my bike with me. That's the most relevant, straightforward answer that could be possible, right? But Mary instead says, I walked in today. So based on relevance, is not totally relevant. But by breaking that maxim of relevance, she is trying to convey the implied message that because she walked in, she doesn't have the bike with her, like that. So this is the implied meaning, right? That John has to work out, assuming that Mary is trying to convey some implied message, like that. The second case is when the quantity maxim is flouted. Quantity has to do with amount of information, right? Not much or not too much or not too little information should be given, just enough to understand. So where did you go yesterday, right? Mary just says Seoul Station, right? So here, Mary doesn't have to say that the only place that I went to was Seoul Station. No, she doesn't have to say that, right? But Mary just said Seoul Station. So John would have to assume, based on the maximum quantity, that that's the enough, right? That's the amount of information, sufficient amount of information that Mary wants to convey. So John would have to guess, make an inference that this is the only place that she went to, like that, because that's the only thing that she told John, right? Without having to say, oh, I only went to Seoul Station, like that. And if it turned out that Mary went to some other places, then John would be surprised, and so on, right? And this is a third example where another maxim is flouted, the maxim of manner, right? So if John asks Mary, how was the professor? And Mary answers, the professor came in and the students left, right? The answer here is still relevant. It's still based on professor, right? Based on the topic of the professor, right? But the manner is being flouted here because Mary could have said, oh, the professor was boring, the professor was not interesting, that's why student left, and so on. But instead, she didn't say that. She only said, the professor came in and the student left. No, unclear, right? Unclear answer, not straightforward, right? So in this case, we say that the maxim of manner is being flouted in order to convey the meaning that the professor is not interesting, perhaps, or he was boring, like that. Okay? Finally, the maxim of quality can be flouted. Quality has to do with the fact that the information should be true as based on what you know, to the best of your knowledge. So for example, John says, I'm gonna fail this class. Mary says, sure, just like you fail every course you take. But suppose Mary, I'm sorry, you should change this to John, okay? Suppose John has aced every class so far. John has got an A+ in every class so far and changes to Mary. And Mary knows this, right? By saying that, Mary says, sure, just like you fail every course you take. She doesn't believe in what she said, right? Realistically speaking, she doesn't believe in what she says. So she's violating the maxim of quality, right? Quality, because she said the wrong thing. And even she herself doesn't believe it, right? So the maxim of quality is being flouted. But the intended meaning, though, is that she wants to say to John that, oh, don't worry, like that. Don't worry, you're going to do fine, like that. Just like you fail every course, meaning that just like you ace every course you take, like that, okay? On the final exam, I will have a situation like this or like other things that we looked at, and then I'll ask you what maxim is being flouted, and you should be able to give me the intended meaning, okay? One tricky thing is that sometimes it could be one or another maxim at the same time. So always give me the reason. Always tell me why you think that quality is being flouted. So in this case, I say that quality is being flouted because Mary doesn't believe in the information that she gave to John, for example. So she gives the wrong information intentionally, and she knows that John knows this, right? So in my opinion, quality is being flouted like that. So give me the reason, okay? I know that what's on the screen here is not clear because I should turn off the lights here, but if I turn off the light, then the camera cannot see what's going on. But since you already have the handout, maybe this is not necessary, okay? This is for the people who are watching the video. So everyone has got one copy, right, of the new handout. So let's look at number 1, right? We call those things Grecian, right? Grecian maxims, right? Grecian maxims. So you have a situation in number 1 where A says to B, do you like John and Kate? B says, Kate is fun. B answers, Kate is fun, right? So we want to try to find out what maxim is being violated here and what meaning do we get. The implicature is the implied message, right? So for number 1, let's look at the maxim. Which maxim? We have 4 maxims so far, right? Quantity, quality, relevance, and also manner, right? So quality, say only things that are true, right? True things. Say only things that are true. Quantity, give sufficient or enough information. Just use the word enough. It's easier for you guys. So give enough info. Not more, not less. Manner, say things that are clear in such a way that is clear, orderly, easy to understand, like that. And then relevance or relation, say things that only are relevant. Say relevant things. Stay on topics, like that. Stay on the topic, like that. So let's look at number 1. Do you like John and Kate? Kate is fun. Here B is still on the topic, right? It's still on the topic, so relation is okay because she answers the question about John and Kate, right? So B is on the topic, so not maximum relation. Manner, so you have quantity, quality, and manner, right? In this case, in my opinion, is quantity that is being violated, right? Quantity. Why is that? The maximum quantity says that you have to give enough information, right? That the listener is looking for. So the listener is looking for the information about John plus Kate, but here only the information about Kate is given. So the maximum quantity is being violated, right? So number 1, the maxim that's being violated is quantity, right? Because B doesn't say anything about John, right? Although the listener expects that, okay? The implicature might be that perhaps John is not fun. Perhaps B is trying to convey the implication that John is not fun. By not mentioning John, she wants to convey the implied message that John is not fun. So the implicature might be John is not fun or John is boring, like that. Kate is more fun than John, like that, okay? Anything is good as long as it has to do with the implied message about John being not as fun, not much fun, like that. Number B, number 2, let's look at number 2. We have a situation between A and B again, and A says, who is picking up the children today? So supposedly A is the parent, one of the parents of the kids. And then B says, I've got a meeting at 3:30, right? So in this case, what maxim is being given here, right? One could argue that it is the relation maxim, right? That instead of saying or instead of naming the person, who, A, John, Mary, whoever, right? Instead of naming, instead of giving a relevant answer being a name, he says, I've got a meeting at 3:30, right? So in this case, I think that maxim of relation is being violated, right? Because the listener is expecting a name, who, right? But the answer is about my meeting, the speaker's meeting, like that. So the maxim of relation is being violated, and the meaning might be that I cannot do that, so other people have to do it, right? So she has this work commitment, so she's suggesting that other people, presumably A, has to pick up the children, like that. Okay, so the implicature is I cannot do it because I have work commitment, and A presumably has to do it, like that. Okay. So far so good. Number 3, below here you see 2 lines from an old song, right? In line 2, you make my heart sing, right? What maxim is being violated here, right? Wild thing here is perhaps a vocative, a call, right? A call. Vocative is like darling, like that. Honey, like that. Wild thing, right? Representing the person who he calls, who he is talking to. And then he says, you, the listener, make my heart sing, right? In this case, my opinion is that the maxim of quality is being violated, right? Because if you look at the sentence, you make my heart sing, right? A heart sing? In reality, can a heart sing? Cannot, right? A heart is just an organ that pumps blood to all over the body, right? And pump blood to the lungs and so on. It cannot sing. So here, the speaker knows in reality that the heart cannot sing, and the hearer also knows that the heart cannot sing, right? But he says that in order to make what we call a, you don't have to memorize this, but perhaps it's useful. Hyperbole. Hyperbole is what we call overstatement. Overstatement. Meaning he exaggerate. You guys know the word exaggerate, right? Exaggerate. He makes an overstatement, right? That, oh, my heart is so happy that it can sing, like that, okay? So the implied meaning is that I'm in love with you, and you have attracted me so much that I'm so happy, and I would like to sing a song like that, okay? My heart is calling for you, like that. I love you so much, like that. So all of these could be possible implied meanings, okay? Possible implied messages. So when you see a hyperbole or an overstatement, okay, you have a case of the violation of the quality maxim, okay? Because the speaker knows and the hearer knows that it's not possible for the heart to sing like that. Or when you have metaphors, you guys know metaphors, right? Metaphor is this comparison between things, right? Simply put, if your boyfriend says to you, oh, you are the light of my life, like this. You are the light of my light. You are the light of my life. Without you, my life is dark, like that. So this is a metaphor, right? And metaphor, in many cases, exaggerate things, right? In fact, you are not the light of anyone's life like that, right? But this is being exaggerated in order to convey the implied meaning that I cannot live without you, like that. Okay, so the maxim of quality is being violated. And number 4, let's look at number 4. You ask a friend what he thinks of a lecturer, of a professor who is known for being sarcastic. So that person is infamous for being sarcastic, right? What maxim is being flouted below? If that person says, he's not the politest person I have met. If you ask him, oh, what do you think of that professor? He's not the politest person I have met, right? So in this case, in my opinion, the maxim of manner is being violated. Because the most straightforward way that he could have said would be, he's rude. He's rude, right? The more straightforward way to say it is, he's rude, like that, okay? He's rude. So instead, the person says, he's not the politest person I have met. That's a more indirect way of saying it, right? More polite way, more lenient way of saying it, right? More gentle way of saying he's rude. So in this case, the maxim of manner is being violated. The implicator is, of course, he's rude, right? And he violates that maxim, he flouts that maxim because perhaps he's afraid of people hearing it, right? So maybe that's why people violate or flout the maxims blatantly. And the last one is, if I ask Tongmin, do you want some chocolates? And Tongmin says, there must be 20,000 calories there. There must be 20,000 calories there, right? So here, the maxim that is being violated is relation, right? And also perhaps quality, right? Sometimes two maxims can be violated at the same time. Why do I say that it's relation? Because first, he asked about whether I want the chocolates or not. I should have said, yes, I do want them, or no, I don't, right? So that would be relevant. But here, I went off and talked about the calories. So the relation is being flouted. And also the quality is being flouted in the sense that, you know, I believe that in reality, it must not be up to 20,000, right? 20,000 is really a lot of calories, right? So a bar of chocolate or even 10 bars of chocolate would not be equal to that amount of calories. But I exaggerate things, right? I exaggerate things in order to say that, oh, I don't want the chocolates, right? So the implied message is, no, I don't want it like that, right? No, I don't want it. Only if both know that I'm on a diet, like that. If they know that if both know that the person is being on a diet, then the implied message would be that, oh, I don't want the chocolates, like that. Okay. But if the context changes such that the situation is I'm trying to gain weight, or Dongmin is trying to gain weight, like that, then there must be 20,000 calories in there, would be intended to mean, yes, I want that because I want to gain weight, like that. Okay? So context is also important. Okay? So this is an example of how people flout, right, or violate the maxims blatantly or obviously, right? And now we finish that chapter of meaning and pragmatics. And we go into the last, from now on, we go into the last chapter of this semester, this class, which is historical linguistics, right? The early story of English, or historical linguistics, right? So historical linguistics when we talk about historical linguistics, we look at older stages of a particular language or of many languages. And we also have to talk about language families, how people group languages into different families, just like we are grouped into different families in real life. And we'll focus on the history of English. Since this is an introduction class, we can only focus on a few points, okay? And we will talk about sound changes, morphological changes, and meaning changes or semantic changes that we see in the history of English in this chapter. So just to give you an overview of what historical linguistics is, historical linguistics, some people also call it diachronic linguistics, right? Dia is like diameter, means across. Chron is time. Chronology, chronological order, time has to do with time. So across time. So linguistics across time, right? The linguistics that we have been looking at from the beginning of the semester, phonology, phonetics, morphology, syntax, meaning, they are all on this period of English, right? Modern day English, right? Present day English. But when we do diachronic linguistics, we look at the language, in this case English, in earlier stages, right? And we study language change. When we look at different periods of English or different periods of Korean, Japanese, we study how that particular language changed through time, right? And we want to do three things: to describe and account for changes in a particular language, to reconstruct the prehistory of a particular language. So before, perhaps in Shakespeare's time, for example, you guys know Shakespeare's, right? Shakespeare's period, right? Around the 16th to 15th to 17th century, like that. So in that time, we don't have any technology to record people's speeches, right? So in this case, we have to do what we call reconstruction. So we have to reconstruct how people spoke English that day, or even before that period into Middle English like Chaucer, or into Old English period. We have to reconstruct because what we have is based on written evidence only. So we have to use written evidence to reconstruct the sounds of earlier English like that, just like earlier Korean or Japanese or Chinese like that. And finally, to develop general theories about how and why language changes. So this is for language change in general. Okay? But before we look at English, there are some basic assumptions that people should know. The first assumption is languages are constantly changing and they are never static, right? And no one can stop language from changing, meaning that language changes every day on an everyday basis. And you don't feel that, right? You don't feel that because changes are subtle. Changes are small. But if you look at perhaps 100 years ago and today, of course you see a lot of changes because you look at two periods that are so distinct. But on a day-to-day basis, you don't perceive that. You don't perceive that language change, right? But language is constantly changing, right? And because we speak the language, we write every day, right? If it's a dead language, then it doesn't change anymore, like Latin, for example, right? People don't use it in daily life, so people study it on just based on written evidence. So people follow the grammar that they are told to say or to write. So there's no change, right? And changes in language may or may not be subject to speakers' conscious manipulation. That is, sometimes you consciously change the way you speak to be like another person, right? So sometimes, for example, when I learn Korean, I have to pronounce things with a Korean accent, try as best as I can, right? That's a conscious way to do it. But sometimes you just do it unconsciously, right? To sound like another person unconsciously because you admire the way he talks or the way he writes. So you unconsciously do that. So that's possible. And changes do not happen overnight, but may take 100 years to complete, right? So changes are going on, right? Not just, oh, tomorrow we'll say it a different way, like that, not like that, right? But little by little. Changes can be on any level of language, could be on the level of sound, syntax, meaning, or pragmatic, could be anything, right? And then changes may be systematic, meaning affecting the whole class. You will see in the case of vowel change that we'll be studying in this class, or sporadic, meaning that some words you have the change, but some words that look like it do not have that change. Changes may be sporadic or systematic. Okay. Let's see. One change that is more or less systematic is systematic and in some cases sporadic is in Old English, SW, the sequence S and W, right, is always pronounced like this word, okay. In Old English, you pronounce it sword. S and W always pronounced sword. And sword, like that. And sword and sword, like that. But up to the Middle English period, which is around, we'll talk about the period later. Up to the Middle English period, only the S is pronounced. The W is not pronounced. So we have sword, W is not pronounced. Answer, W is not pronounced, okay? So SW, right, SW in many words, right, could be systematic in that sense. But there are some words like swear, which you pronounce S and W, swear, right? So in this case, you can say that it's sporadic in a sense of swear, right? But it's systematic in the sense of sword and answer and other words that are more or less like these two, okay? And finally, changes are neither good or bad, they are just changes. Meaning that some people say that, oh, when people talk differently, when people change the way they speak, they are destroying the language. It's not like that. Changes are changes, right? They are natural. They are just changes, not good or bad. Example of language change in Korean, right? Perhaps you are familiar with this, that the yo part, mokko yo, like that, the polite particle, some people, especially young people, instead of saying yo, the o, people pronounce it as o, right? Yo, like that, and they write also mokko yo, like that, instead of yo, like that. So that's language change. Not some people say, oh, that's bad, they are ruining, they are destroying the language, but this is just the way that they want to express, this is the way that they want to show their identity. How could it be bad or good, right? Or young Seoul dialect speakers tend to end a question with niya, like odi itnya, like that, instead of itni or itsayo, like that, right? So this is another example. And in English, you have things that people think of as suffixes, but in fact, it has never been used like that before. Like we have words that have friendly as the suffix, like audience friendly, customer friendly, girl friendly, like that. But nowadays, people add friendly to everything, right? Starting from these examples, so we have newspaper friendly, which means that the print doesn't rub off your fingers like that. So this is one aspect of language change. It's not good or bad, right? Syntax, going to the library, just been, right? English, in English, you need, grammatically speaking, you need a subject, right? Are you on your way to the library? Are you going to the library? Yes, I have just been, right? Strictly speaking, you need a subject, but in conversation, people can drop the subject, right? Subject pronouns dropping. Did someone leave their cell phone there? right? Someone used to be singular, leave his or her cell phone, but everybody says their nowadays, right? For whatever reason, for the reason that they don't want to be sexist or whatever, right? But still, you see the language changing that direction, right? The sounds on the level of the sound, some people merge card and court together. Some American English speakers pronounce card and court the same. Card and court, card and court, the same, right? So this is one example of language change on the level of sound, okay? Now, before we take a break, let's look at some history of historical linguistics. So historical linguistics is actually, you can take it as the start or the origin of modern linguistics, okay? Because in the 18th century, 1788, that's the 18th century, right? Sir William Jones, a British philologist, a person who studied languages, he noted that Sanskrit shared many similarities with Greek and Latin. That's the start of modern linguistics, right? Because in linguistics, we compare and analyze data, right? So he first noticed that Sanskrit, which is a language, right, very old language, share many similarities with Greek language, and Latin, right? And these words, he called them cognates, right? He called them cognates, words that look similar in form and share similar meaning, right? And he think that, Sir William Jones think that cognates point to the fact that Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit share the same origin, right? The common father, the common mother language, ancestor language. So he suggested that they had a common ancestor, like that. So by comparing cognates, right, by comparing words that look the same and mean the same thing, it's possible to what we call reconstruct the proto-language, which is the parent language, the ancestor language. And the more similar cognates look, the closer the relationship between those languages, right? And by comparing how similar languages are or how different they are, we can come up with families. We can put languages in family, different families, right? Languages that look the same will be in the same family. Languages that look different will be in a different family, like that. So, for words that mean month, right? Month, right? Tal, like that, right? So, we have English, Dutch, German, Swedish, Welsh, Gaelic. These are all languages, okay? And then words that mean month in these languages are month, and in Dutch, month, German, monad, Swedish, manad, mis, me, and so on, okay? And if you look at these languages, you see that for words that mean month, they all start with an M. You see? M, 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 all the way through Hindi, like that, right? So we think that they must have shared the same parent language, like that. And not only the starting sound, some of these have the same vowel sounds, like English and German, O, also, right? French, O, also. And others, we have A, as in Dutch and Swedish, A and A. For example, in Welsh Gaelic, we have E and E, the letter I, like that. So not only the starting sound, but also the vowel also. And then look at French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. The last consonant, S, 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 also, right? So we think that they are all related, and some of these even have closer relationship, like Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian, because they almost look similar, like that. Okay, and if you compare the languages this side to the languages on the right side, they are totally different. Because on the right side, you have whatever words that you have here. Shadher, Kukasi, Hilabethe, whatever, right? They look so different. So based on similarities and differences like this, we can put languages in different families, okay? And we do not do this process of comparing based on one word, but we look at many words, many cognates like night, month, numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and things like body organs, like how is an arm called, what is an arm called in English, in Portuguese, and so on, right? Night also, in languages, in all of the languages here, they all start with N, right? Start with N. And in some cases, they have the same vowel, like Portuguese and Italian, O, like that, right? And Icelandic, O, and then in other cases, they have A, right? And so on, right? So when they do that process of comparing, right, they can put different languages into different families. And this is the word map, right? And it's color-coded, meaning that whatever is under the same color, they are in the same family, right? So this is, perhaps what you have is not color, right? But because when you print out, it's black and white. So here, this is Africa, right? You see, Africa has perhaps one recognizable family because it's coded by yellow and perhaps brown here, right? So African languages have one family here, which is not shared with here. This is US, right? It's green, right? Green. And here you have here green also. This is Australia, green also, right? And then, so green. And there are different shades of green here. Green like dark green, bright green, and so on. So green languages here are related, but perhaps they have subfamilies like that, okay? And then this is Asian family, right? So you have Chinese here perhaps, and then you have, so this is India, this is Burmese, like that, and then that's Chinese, right? And this is pink, right? Pink. So you have pink over here, right? So Spanish, Portuguese, like that. Spanish also here, right? And this is a different language family in New Zealand, right? Like the indigenous languages, like that, okay? So languages are related because they have a common ancestor, right? And this is just like your family. You are related to your brother, you are related to your sister, your parents, how, and your aunts and other people, right? But in linguistics, we only use the maternal terms. For example, this is my sister language, this is my mother language. I don't know why people don't use paternal terms like father language or brother language like that, okay? And we'll be looking at the biggest family, which is what we call Indo-European family, okay? Indo-European, Indo from India, right? You know, East Asia, South Asia, right? South Asia, so India, right? So this family spreads from India in Asia to Europe, to westernmost Europe. That's why we call it Indo-European, because it's the biggest family that covers the westernmost Europe, European languages like English or Irish to India, to Asia, South Asia. So we call it Indo-European, Indo-European. You also have that map more or less on the new handout. You have that on the new handout, which is here, right? More or less the same handout if you follow, right? So it's the it's the Indo-European, okay? Indo-European, you have that. You see that it has, on the top, it has many what we call subfamilies. Subfamilies. Sub meaning little, right? Subfamilies. Subfamilies. So the biggest family, the whole family is called Indo-European family, right? The biggest family of the world. Of course, Korean is not in this family. So Indo-European has so many subfamilies starting from the left-hand most, the most left-hand side, which is Indo-Iranian, right? So India and Iran, like that. And then Hellenic. Hellenic has to do with Greek, right? Greek, right? Hellenic is Greek. And then Celtic. Celtic is here. Celtic has to do with Irish, right? Irish, Welsh, Scottish. So these are all Celtic, okay? We call them Celtic. And then we have Italic. Italic has to do with Romance languages, you guys know. Languages that descend from Latin, like Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, right? If you study Spanish, you should be able to understand Italian, for example, because they are so close to each other, right? And then we have Balto-Slavic, right? So Balto-Slavic has to do with Polish, Russian, and so on, right? So Russia is in between Europe and Asia. And then we have Germanic. Germanic has to do with German, right? German, and you have English in this branch also. So Germanic goes to North Germanic, Germanic that is spoken in the north, right? In the north, if you have the world map in your head, you will have Swedish, Norwegian, Icelandic. Those are North Germanic. And then West Germanic, west of German, right? West of German, it would be English, right? English, Frisian, Dutch, and so on, and German, Yiddish, and so on. So where is English? English is in the Germanic branch, and specifically West Germanic branch, right? West Germanic branch. And English has its sister meaning you guys are sister and brothers, right? English is here, the sister is Dutch, right? So English and Dutch are very similar. So people who speak Dutch will have no difficulty or little difficulty studying English because they are so similar. They are sister languages, right? And German is another sister, but not as close as Dutch, for example. And you see the kind of perforated arrow from French to English because there are a lot of borrowed words, and we'll be talking about this in the second hour today, that during the Middle English period, England was governed by French people for about 300 years. So we borrow a lot of words from French, and words that you can imagine, words that are not just four-letter words like love, like I, like head, words like government, parliament, fashion, and so on. We'll be talking about those words. Recipe, beef, or mutton, like sheep, the meat of sheep. All those words that have to do with fashion, music, government, the law, everything has been borrowed from French. That's why there is this perforated arrow from French here, okay? Because French has a huge influence on the vocabulary of English like that. So English, to sum up, English is in the Germanic family, right? In the West Germanic family, and its closest sister is Dutch, like that, but with influence from French, like that, okay? So we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and look at other aspects of English, the history of English, okay? So we looked at the origin of English, right, as to where it came from, right? And we know that English is related to other Germanic languages like German, Dutch, and African, Frisian, and so on, right? And English was in contact with French in the medieval or Middle English period. So that's what we know so far. Now we'll look in details as to the history of English and as to where it came from, okay? So typically when we talk about the history of English, we can divide the whole history into 4 different periods, starting with Old English, Middle English, Early Modern English, and Present Day English. So Old English is around the 5th century, so about the year 400, right? So 5th century is the year 400 to the 11th century, right, which is around that, right? And the Middle English is after the Old English period. The Middle English period has literary work like Chaucer, if you have heard, Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales, like that. And Old English, the most important literary work is Beowulf, right? And the Early Modern English is from the 14th to 18th century, and that's when we have Shakespeare, that's when we have Dryden, that's when we have Alexander Pope, when we have John Milton, and Emily Bronte, and Daniel Defoe, and all other people, right? And also you have American English beginning in this period in the 17th century, right? When some of the British people moved to the New World, America. And present day English, which is from the 18th century till now. One of the things that I have to say is that these dividing lines from Old English to Middle English to Early, and so on, the lines are artificial, right? Artificial, not natural or not linguistic in any sense, because it's not like, oh, the new year of the 11th century, then we switch to Middle English. It's not like that, right? And as you can see, the word middle should be in between, right? But we know that present day English is getting extended and extended and extended, right? As time goes by, then middle is not middle, right? So just take these names, these periods, as convenient terms rather than any natural or correct way to call them, okay? They are just artificials, okay? Artificial names, and not all people agree on the same starting date and ending date like that. And there are some historical reasons that have to do with what happened, history, but reasons that are not linguistic or natural in any way, that's why people divide Old English at the end of the 11th century like that, okay? So let's look at, so these are how the first 2 lines from the Lord's Prayer in Old English, Middle English, Early Modern English, and Modern English, right? And we know that in Old English and in Middle English, words are pronounced the way they are written, okay? So in other words, they are phonetic, right? The pronunciation is phonetic, unlike present day English, right? Where one letter can represent so many sounds, if you remember when we talked about phonetics. So here, in the first line of the Lord's Prayer, we have Father, right? This is just the same that we study in phonetics. Father. So you think, oh, that looks familiar, right? Father. So it's father, right? So that's the origin of the word father. So father, like that. So everything is pronounced in Old English, and everything is pronounced exactly as it's spelled. So the letter U is pronounced U, just like the phonetic symbol U. So ure, this is A, just like our A that we study in phonetics. Father ure, this one is different. This one is just one of the symbols that we didn't use. So this is like P with the what we call ascender. People who study Old English would call that ascender. Okay, P like this with what we call ascender. To ascend is to go up, right? To go up. So there's a line that when we write a P, it's just like this, right? But this P has an ascender, which means the thing that goes up. It's called a thorn. If you are interested, it's called a thorn. And it is a TH sound. or the theta sound or the cross D sound, depending on the environment. The TH sound in modern English, that is to say, the TH is interdental, remember? So father, and then this is U, right? Just as the phonetic symbol, ure, a, right? Thu, right? Thu. So TH sound, thu, the. This is TH also, thu the art on heophonum, like that, on heophonum, like that. So heophonum, like that. So Old English is, in terms of pronunciation, is easier than modern English because you don't have to guess whether this E, the letter E, is A or other vowels, just unlike in modern English, right? So it's the same one sound. Father ure thu the at on heavenum, like that. Perhaps you don't see that. This is E, right? C, just E. C, thin, nama, yehalgod, like that. C, thin, nama, yehalgod, like that. So E is the phonetic E, is E. C, thin, nama, yehalgod, like that. So in modern English, our Father who is in heaven, you see the word heaven? On heavenum is heaven, right? It has some traces, right? H start with an H. F changes to V because we borrow V from French, for example. And then UM is the case ending which we'll talk about, is gone. So just like heaven is heaven, like that. And then nama is name, right? Just the only difference is the ending sound. Nama is name, like that, right? Halgod is holy, like that, right? And then thin is thine. Your or odor is thigh, right? So the, if you look at Shakespeare's plays or the Old Bible, you see the and thigh. So those are you, the you pronouns, okay? The you pronoun. So Father ure tu the add-on heavenum, sitin nama yehalgod, tu bekume tin riche, and so on. So if you study Old English, you'll be able to memorize all these. And then in Middle English, there are some changes, right? Because it's a period of hundreds and hundreds of years, at least 300 years. So we have ure, which is here, right? Spelling is different, but the pronunciation is the same. Ure, father, just like this, right? Some vowels like a here is changed, a here is changed to e, right? But still, you see the trace. That art in heaven. So art, A is gone, so you have art still, heaven, heavenum to heaven, like that. So you use the U instead of the V, right? Because in Middle English, remember that's when French influence came in, right? And in French, they use V or U, right? U and V are the same thing, right? And then hallowed be thy name, same thing, right? Thy nama, and so on, right? This is the Shakespeare time, and this is our modern English time, right? So that's just a glimpse of what Old English looks like. And if you look at the history of Old English, which is between the 5th century to the 11th century, right? So there's a reason why people pick this date. It's historical rather than any linguistic or scientific reason. So before the arrival, before there's such a language as English, we have Celts, the Celts, or we call them Celtic adjective. Celtic people inhabited what is nowadays known as the British Isles for 1,000 years. So the Celtic people were the native, you know, the name native, right? Native has to do with people who belong to the land. Things or people or animal or plants that belong to the land. So Celtic people were the native people on the British Isles, right? And what language did they speak? Of course, Celtic languages. Remember Celtic languages? If you look at your family tree, the Celtic languages are like Irish, Welsh, and Breton, Cornish, and so on, right? Gaelic, Scottish, like that. So no English to start with, no English, only Celtic people, right? So they speak Celtic languages like Welsh, like Cornish, Irish, Scottish, Gaelic, like that. And then around the year 43, right? The Romans invaded the Isles. They are trying to extend their territory, right? The Roman Empire was so big and influential, powerful, and took control for about 400 years. So they live alongside Celtic people. So you start, for the starting out, you have Celtic languages. You have then Roman people, right? The Roman people spoke what? Latin, right? So you have two languages to start with. And then at the collapse of the Roman Empire, about 450, the Roman soldiers left England, right? Because they had to go back to Rome in order to protect that capital, right? Rome was the capital of the Roman Empire then, right? So about that. And then at about that time, there are three groups of people: the Angles, the Jutes, and the Saxons, right? They sail across the ocean, right, from around the area known as Germany and Denmark, right, arrive. So there are three groups of people, and we don't know how related they are, to what extent. They may be of different tribes, but they may be able to communicate with each other using different dialects, right? So we know that they sail along the ocean, and then they came to the British Isle, right? So these people, they are Germanic speaking peoples. So the starting out of English is actually Germanic languages. Okay, so English, that's why we call it English is a Germanic language, because the origin of English is from the Angles, the Jutes, and the Saxons, three groups of people, right? And in the 9th century, so during the 5th and the 9th century, they live perhaps peacefully, right? And then when they arrive, what's interesting is that they kick off the Celtic people to different corners, the farthest corner of England. So like Wales, like Ireland, like Scotland. So they kick out the Celtic people, and they assume their position across the island, along the coastal areas, and also in the middle, right? And they kick out the Celtic people to different corners, the furthest corners possible. And but in the 9th century, there are Viking people, right? And we call them Norse meaning north, from the north. We call them Vikings. Scandinavian people invaded. And that's a significant influence because they were so powerful that there is a pact between the Angle king and the Scandinavian king that the Scandinavian people could rule half of the island, and the English people the other half of the island, like that. And then 1066 we have the Norman invasion, which is when we have French people coming to govern the British Isle. So I'll talk about 1066 next time. But today you should know that English started out with Germanic peoples, right? Three tribes, meaning the Angle, the Jutes, and the Saxons, right? And there's no English to start with. They spoke Germanic languages, and they're different tribes, but they could communicate with each other. Presumably, they spoke different dialects of the same language, like that. Okay. And then in the 9th century, we have Scandinavian people, right, from Scandinavia, from the north, right? And they brought with them the Scandinavian language, right? So how many languages do we have to start with? Celtic, Latin, right? Which play a little influence in the development of English. And then the main influence is, of course, the Germanic languages here, and also some Scandinavian influence, right? Because when people immigrate, when people move, they brought with them the languages, right? So this is how the Angles and the Jutes and the Saxons, like from these areas to different, settle down along the coastal areas of England, right? So the Saxon settled down in places that have the sex name, like Sussex, Wessex, like that, right? Essex, like that, and then the Anglo is Anglia, like that, and then the Jude in Kent, like that. So if you want to go into details. So, but they settle along different coastal areas of England, and then also in the middle area of England. And of course, even though they could communicate with each other, as I said, they spoke different dialects. So people who settled in this area will speak a little bit differently from people who settle down here. That's why we have different dialects in England nowadays. Just like we have different dialects of US English, right, nowadays, also because of the pattern of immigration, pattern of migration, like that. And so the Celtic people are kicked out to this area, which is Wales, and this area Scotland, and so on. Okay. Characteristic of Old English, right? So this is the most important thing that we'll study. I can just, because we have not much time, and this is just an introduction class, I just have to pick some important aspects, right? So some important aspects of Old English are that Old English nouns, Old English words, nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, they are highly inflected, meaning that you have a lot of morphological endings, right? Especially nouns and adjectives, both noun and adjectives, are inflected. You have suffixes for case, number, and gender, right? So number, we already have in modern English, singular or plural, right? In modern English, we add s or no s, 0. So in Old English, you have singular and plural too. So that one, you don't have to worry because you already know. Now gender, nowadays we don't have. We have natural gender, meaning Krista, you use he because naturally he is a male, like that, right? But gender in Old English is just like French. If you study French or Spanish, is grammatical gender rather than natural gender. So table could be female. There's no reason why table has to be female. Or the moon has to be female. Sun is male. There's no natural reason why. But so natural gender, grammatical gender rather than natural gender. So we have 3 genders even, masculine, feminine, and neuter. There's no reason why, for example, I is neuter, the I, the word I, like that. So we don't have this in modern English, but in Old English we have. In modern English we have case. Nominative case is subject case, right? Accusative, we'll talk about this. Accusative is object case. So in modern English we do have accusative and nominative, right? Nominative is just subject, okay? Nominative is subject. So, for example, I, right? I is nominative. He is nominative. She, they, all nominative, right? Correct. Accusative, which is object of a verb. Object of verbs. We also have in modern English, object is me, he is him, right? She is her, they is them. We have, right? So in modern English we have cases. In Old English they have cases too. Nominative, accusative. Genitive, we also have in modern English. Genitive is possessive. Genitive is possessive. So, possessive in modern English is I, not I car, but my car, for example, right? So my, he, not he car, but his car, right? His, she, her car, they, their car, like that, right? So we have. And finally, dative. Dative is object of other things, object of prepositions. Dative is object of preposition. Dative, object of preposition. accusative is object of a verb, right? Dative is object of preposition, like I give the book to is object, right? To me, to him, to her, to them. In English, modern English, the dative case happens to be the same as accusative, right? Happens to be the same as accusative. Okay, same as accusative in modern English. But in Old English, totally different. Okay. So we'll look at case in Old English because it's a distinctive thing. And verbs are also inflected for tense, modern English also. Mood, we don't really have that. Indicative, subjunctive, imperative. In Old English, all different. And number, singular, plural, we have that, right? And there are also strong verbs and weak verbs in Old English. Just like in modern English, weak verbs are verbs that have the ed ending, but strong verbs are verbs that change the sound, like sing, sang, sung, eat, ate, eaten, like that. So that's strong verb. Okay? So we look at cases. Okay, this is the last thing that we'll talk about today. So we talked about this in passing. Nominative case is the case of the subject and noun and all nouns and adjectives after be verb. Like the king is powerful. This has to be in a nominative case. So in Old English, you will have a suffix here. You will have a suffix here. But in modern English, if it's just a noun, we mark it with a 0. We don't mark the king with anything if it's singular, right? But in pronoun, we have a different form, I and me, okay? But if it's just a regular noun, in modern English, in present day English, we don't mark the nominative case, you see? It's 0, right? The king is the king. You don't have any suffix to mark that it's a subject, right? Accusative also. Accusative, object of the verb. In modern English, if it's a noun, you mark it with a 0, right? Nothing if it's singular. If it's plural, you add an S, but still you don't mark it as an object, as an accusative case. But with pronouns, you do, right? Dative, do you mark anything? Nothing, right? After proposition, you mark the king with 0 marking. So nominative, the king, accusative, the king would be here also. And dative, the king, all look alike in modern English. And genitive, we mark it. If it's apostrophe S, we mark it with apostrophe S, genitive. Or you can say it with the word of. But when you do with the word of, it's without marking, right? So that's why in modern English, word order is very important. If you say the dragon killed the king and the king killed the dragon, that's different, right? Who does what to whom, right? Depends on the word order in modern English. But in Old English, or you can imagine the same situation. If I mark the king killed the dragon, if, let's say, I marked it with a suffix. So if I mark the king A is accusative, right? And if I mark the dragon as nom, like that. Now, do you know who killed whom? You know that wherever the dragon is, wherever the position, because it has that marking nom, it has to be the one that killed the king and the king died, like that. So it doesn't matter whether you write it like this, the dragon, and then nom, and then the king act, accusative, and then kill as the final verb. It doesn't matter how you arrange the word order because you already know who does what by looking at the case ending, the suffix, right? The suffix will tell you, oh, that's nominative, so it must be the subject of kill. Oh, that's the accusative, it must be the object. So in Old English, word order doesn't really matter, although there is a tendency to follow a particular word order. Word order is not that important in Old English because you have the case endings that tell you who does what to whom, okay? Just like in modern Korean, right? You also have the case ending I or ga, right? And then ul and lul to mark the object, to mark the subject. Although you don't do that all the time, pap mokko, like that. Pap mokkotso, you don't have to say pabul mokkotso, right? But you know that pub is the object, right? In Old English, also the same. You have case ending that tells you where or what, who does what to whom, okay? So in Old English, case markings, the case marking is very important, okay? Just like this, okay? You have singular and plural, right? Singular and plural, and then you have different cases for each singular, plural, nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, nominative, accusative, genitive, dative for each, right? And then you have different genders also, masculine, neuter. You don't have to care about short or long, okay? Because we are just doing introduction here. So the word stan, which is stone in Old English, when it's nominative and accusative, stan is stan, which is stone. Stan is marked with a 0, right? But when it becomes a genitive, you see it's marked with an S. Stan, not just an S, ES, stanes. Stan becomes stanes, right? This is more or less like apostrophe S. This is the remnant of the apostrophe S in modern English. Apostrophe is just a punctuation that we added in the early modern English, but it comes from this ES, okay? The apostrophe S. And then dative, object of a preposition, it's just a, stane, like that. So nominative, accusative, singular, 0 marking. Genitive, ES, dative, E, like that, stane. Plural, nominative, accusative, you have AS ending, see? That's the origin of S, plural S in modern English. And then genitive, stana, which is different from genitive here, right? Singular is stanes, plural genitive is stana, dative, stanum. Stanum and stane, different because singular and plural. And if you have neuter nouns, meaning gender is neutral, you have different markings. For nominative, accusative, same, but genitive same, dative same, but nominative and accusative or plural, shippu, u, rather than nas, is different. So there's no rule as to why this is u, why this is as, why this is es, es. There's no rule. People who study Old English just study the words and they found that these words exhibit the same patterns, so they group it in the masculine group, and these words have the u ending in plural, so they group it in the neuter group, like that. There's no rule, okay? So people who study Old English have to memorize if they want to decline, if they want to do the case ending correctly. So we have feminine. Feminine will have the u here in the singular, give, gufu, like that, and so on. Okay. So this is where we will stop, and then next time we'll come back and finish off historical linguistics. And next time we'll also do a review for our final also. So I have this preparation study guide for you, and I'll just pass it out. So we'll go over this study guide to prepare you for the final exam. So please do this before you at home, okay? Before you come here next time, and we'll go over it together. So for the final, we'll do syntax, pragmatics, and also historical linguistics, okay? So the type of questions that you will find on the final will be like the questions that you have on this handout also. Okay? So next time we'll do a final review, and we'll finish off this historical linguistics.